This is Community Radio Networks. Let's get this week started. It is Monday, the 18th of March. Let's get you the world news, the financial news, and all the other information that you need to get ready to take on this week. We'll start with the world news first, coming up for you right now. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news read by Shabnam Matgil. President Putin won a record post-Soviet landslide in Russia's election yesterday, cementing his already tight grip on power in a victory he said showed Moscow had been right to stand up to the West and send its troops into Ukraine. A former KGB lieutenant colonel who first rose to power in 1999 made it clear that the result should send a message to the West that its leaders will have to reckon with an emboldened Russia, whether in war or peace, for many years to come. The outcome means that the 71-year-old Vladimir Putin is set to embark on a new 6-year term that will see him overtake Joseph Stalin and become Russia's longest-serving leader for more than 200 years if he completes it. President Putin sealed his control over Russia for 6 more years with a highly orchestrated landslide in an election that followed the harshest crackdown on the opposition and free speech since Soviet times. Vladimir Putin tightening this grip on power, claiming the 6-year term as Russian president after a brutally distorted election in which all serious challengers were wiped out before voting began. With 50% of ballots counted, he stood at 87.3% of the vote, and the turnout was 73.33%. Russian Foreign Ministry has said NATO's crusade against Moscow boosted Putin's win. Spokesman Maria Zakharova lashed out at NATO members for criticizing Russian polls. The German Foreign Ministry had called Russia's election neither free nor fair. The US and the UK also mocked the Russian polls alleging Putin stealing another election. The West itself has paved the way for Vladimir Putin's historic victory in the presidential election by ensuring that NATO is perceived in Russia as a dangerous enemy, according to the spokesman. And Russian President Putin said he supported an idea to release opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a prisoner exchange just days before the man who was his biggest foe died. It happens, he said. There's nothing you can do about it. The remarks were unusual in that he repeatedly referenced Navalny by his first name for the first time in years, and that they came at a late-night news conference as results poured in from a presidential election that is certain to extend his rule. President Putin said after extending his rule in an election that had stifled opposition that Moscow will not relent in its invasion of Ukraine and plans to create a buffer zone along the border to help protect against long-range Ukrainian strikes and cross-border raids. The Kremlin has said that the only way to protect Russian territory from Ukrainian attacks was to create this buffer zone that would put Russian regions beyond the range of Ukrainian fire. President Putin has said that this full-scale conflict with NATO cannot be ruled out. At the press conference in Moscow this morning to mark his victory in presidential elections accompanied by allegations of manipulation. European Union foreign ministers hope to agree new sanctions on Russia at a meeting in Brussels today following the death of opposition politician Alexei Navalny last month and the re-election of Vladimir Putin today. The first flight from Haiti in 2 weeks landed at the Miami International Airport. The Global X charter flight from Cape Haitian touched down yesterday afternoon. There were 47 passengers on board, all of whom were U.S. citizens escaping that chaos there. Passengers say they became aware of the U.S.-sponsored flight through an email and all became aware through the State Department web page. Protesters took to the streets of Cuba yesterday in a rare outburst of social unrest as a fresh wave of blackouts exacerbated tensions on the cash-strapped island. Social media posts showed crowds of people in Santiago de Cuba, the second largest city on the eastern part of the island, chanting "Corriente Comida," power and food, as police looked on. Former Vice President Mike Pence has said that his decision not to endorse former President Trump's re-election campaign is as much about Trump's actions on the 6th of January in 2021 as it is about his walking away from conservative principles. Donald Trump is running against California again in his campaign to win a second term. The former president frequently excoriates the state as a terrifying dystopia, the inevitable product, he claims, of democratic policies. The place is failing, he told a conservative conference last month, and it has become a symbol of our nation's decline. Former President Trump shared some questionable comments about undocumented immigrants during a rally yesterday, saying that they are not people. The comments from him came as he continued to suggest that the people who were entering the country were prisoners or gang affiliated, mentioning MS-13 were crossing the border. Barring intervention by the Supreme Court, the toughest immigration law in U.S. history is set to take effect in Texas at 4 o'clock today. The U.S. Supreme Court could rule any time that the stay expires, and the law that would give police the ability to arrest anyone suspected of making illegal entry and judges the ability to deport without a traditional hearing. This is the Texas law known as SB 4, has been on hold since it was passed. A tragedy for a University Park family was caught up in a chain reaction crash in Wilbarger County, leaving parents and 2 teenagers seriously hurt and a 9-year-old girl dead. Police reported and said that Michael and Marissa Mullins and their 3 children were on Highway 287 a few miles southeast of Vernon when a minivan careened across the grassy median and slammed into their SUV. The 2 and their 2 teenage boys are in the hospital with serious injuries, but tragically their 9-year-old daughter was killed and the driver of the minivan also died and a teenage passenger hurt. The U.S., which provides Israel with billions of dollars in military assistance, has said it wants a clear and implementable plan to ensure civilians are out of harm's way. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is refusing to bow to these calls by a top U.S. senator for a new election and is pushing back against White House warnings about a potential new offensive in Gaza, widening a rift with top Democrats in Washington. IDF forces are currently engaged in a precise operation in the vicinity of the Shifa hospital, and this operation is prompted by intelligence indicating that senior Hamas terrorists are utilizing the hospital to orchestrate and facilitate terrorist activities. The IDF remains committed to upholding international law while countering the Hamas terrorist organization. Hamas has a documented history of exploiting hospitals and civilian infrastructure for its nefarious purposes, disregarding the distinction between civilians and its own operatives. Israeli forces have launched that operation in and around Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, and at least 61 Palestinians killed in overnight Israeli bombardment, taking the death roll up to 31,645 as Israel prepares to send negotiators to new truce talks in Qatar. Israel has killed more than 13,000 children in Gaza since the 7th of October. An anti-poverty charity, Oxfam, accused Israel of intentionally preventing the delivery of aid into Gaza during its conflict with Hamas in violation of international humanitarian law. The UN Food Agency has said this morning that famine is imminent in northern Gaza, where 70% of the remaining population is experiencing catastrophic hunger, and that a further escalation of the war could push around half of Gaza's total population to the brink of starvation. We are united on this day, said Emmanuel Macron after meeting Olaf Scholz in Berlin, and determined never to let Russia win the war in Ukraine. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz questioned the terribly high cost of Israel's offensive on Palestinian Islamist group Hamas in Gaza, saying the world could not simply stand by and watch as Palestinians risk starvation in that enclave. The Jordanian army said its air defense radar system had detected suspicious aerial movements from an unknown source along the border with Syria, which a regional security source said were most probably missiles fired by pro-Iranian militia from Iraq. A critical U.S. partner in Northwest Africa is turning towards Russia amid warnings from the top U.S. commander in the continent that the Russians are trying to take over the entire Sahel region of Africa. Niger, which has served as a crucial foothold for U.S. counter-terrorism operations in the region for nearly a decade, announced that it was ending the accord that has allowed U.S. military personnel and civilian staff to operate in the country since 2014. South Africa is under fire for spending millions of dollars talking to terror group Hamas and sending delegations for cozy negotiations with U.S. adversaries Russia and Iran, and some critics say the money could be better spent tackling the chaos back home. South Sudan is closing all schools starting today in preparation for an extreme heat wave expected to last 2 weeks. And the European Union announced a €7.4 billion aid package for cash-strapped Egypt as concerns mount that economic pressure and conflicts in neighboring countries could drive more migrants to European shores. Polish farmers blocked 2 border crossings with Germany today as protests against European Union environment regulations and cheap imports sweep the bloc. Southern Iceland was hit with its 4th volcanic eruption in the past 3 months over the weekend, prompting the evacuation of thousands from a nearby town and tourist attraction. And no deaths have been confirmed as of right now, but a local worker remains unaccounted for after falling into a fissure opened by the seismic activity. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. On this Monday morning, it is the 18th of March. Senior International Olympic Committee Vice President John Coates is unsure how many Russian athletes will compete as neutral athletes at the Paris Games, but thinks reports that it might be as low as 40 could be close to that mark. North Korea has shipped around 7,000 containers filled with munitions and other military equipment to Russia since last year to help support its war in Ukraine. And North Korea fired short-range ballistic missiles into the sea today for the first time in 2 months as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Seoul for a conference hosted by President Yoon Suk-yeol on advancing democracy. South Korean authorities have suspended the licenses of 2 senior doctors for allegedly inciting the weeks-long walkout by thousands of medical interns and residents that have disrupted hospital operations. And with politicians pouring in to greet him, a dinner with Thailand's Prime Minister and a police escort to places he went, billionaire former Premier Thaksin Shinawatra looked more like a statesman this weekend than a convicted criminal on parole. Loyalist cabinet ministers and lawmakers flew to his hometown of Chiang Mai to visit and consult Thaksin, projecting an image of power for a tycoon who loomed large over politics throughout his 15 years in self-exile, to skip jail for abuse of power and conflicts of interest, and made a dramatic return to Thailand last August and was paroled on last month, 6 months into an 8-year jail sentence that had been commuted to a year by the king. From a discussion that included yoga and Bollywood to a photo session and a tea break with some pancakes and savories, the Russian ambassador, Denis Alepov, had planned an engaging session with young members from the Indian delegation that went to Sochi to participate in the World Youth Festival 2024. The festival was held last week and was a platform to bring together youngsters and experts from different fields from across the world. Prime Minister Modi today launched a scathing attack on Congress MP Rahul Gandhi for his Shakti remark and accused India's opposition bloc of trying to eradicate Hindu Shakti. The India bloc in their manifesto said their fight is against Shakti, and for me every mother, daughter and sister is a form of Shakti, and I worship them in the form of Shakti, said the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Modi will hold a road show today, days after the Madras High Court green flagged the event, asking the police to allow it with reasonable conditions. He's taking out the road show in the city's Mettupalayam Road and is likely to end it at R.S. Puram later today. This will be his first political engagement in the state after the announcement of the 7-phase schedule of the Lok Sabha polls. And ahead of Prime Minister Modi's rally in Karnataka, it is Shivamoga today, the Congress leader Jairam Ramesh pointing out issues going on in the state that need to be addressed by the Prime Minister in his rally. The Election Commission today ordered the removal of Home Secretaries of 6 states, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, who are holding charges in Chief Minister offices. And Aam Aadmi Party senior leader Atishi called the Enforcement Directorate and the CBI Prime Minister Modi's gunde and said the BJP wanted to arrest the party's national convener Arvind Kejriwal before the Lok Sabha elections. Delhi Chief Minister and Aam Aadmi Party National Convener Arvind Kejriwal today skipped another summons issue by the Enforcement Directorate, calling it illegal. The Taliban in Afghanistan have launched heavy weapons at Pakistan military posts near its border, following 2 airstrikes by Islamabad that killed 8 people, including 5 women and 3 children. The strikes come a day after Pakistan President Asif Ali Zardari vowed retaliation following the deaths of these 7 soldiers, including 2 officers, in a terrorist attack on a security forces post in North Waziristan, and that happened on Saturday. An Afghan interim government official today said that the Afghanistan provinces of Paktika and coast along the Pakistan border were hit by airstrikes which killed 8 people. And the strikes come a day after President Zardari vowed retaliation following the martyrdom of these 7 soldiers, including 2 officers. Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar has said that the Pakistan-China all-weather strategic cooperative partnership is indispensable for the progress and prosperity of the 2 countries. And the Foreign Office hailed the adoption of a Pakistan-sponsored resolution by the UN General Assembly on measures to combat Islamophobia. Voting trends in the February 8th elections demonstrated that there is a strong desire for change among the Pakistani youth, and this according to a senior U.S. diplomat. The ruling PMLN accused the PTI of running a smear campaign against the country's martyrs, and allegations swiftly rejected by the opposition party. And the PTI shared videos of its party supporters chanting slogans in the favor of incarcerated ex-premier Imran Khan. Neither is he a rebel nor a traitor. Prisoner 804, please release Imran Khan. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif granted a 1-year extension to Air Chief Marshal Zahir Ahmed Babar Sidhu. He sent the advisory of the Air Chief Marshal's extension to President Zardari and granted him extension after his approval. The 9th edition of the HBL Pakistan Super League is set to culminate in a title-deciding clash between a side for which finals have been a curse lately and a team which doesn't know how to lose one. At the National Bank Stadium today, Multan Sultans playing their 3rd PSL final in a row, the first of which resulted in their maiden trophy, but the other 2 saw them go down to the Lahore Calendars by 42 runs in 2022 and by an agonizing margin of 1 run last year. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you today, but I do have your financial news coming up next. Stay with us right here to listen to the financial news. All right, let's go ahead and get you your financial news now. And we normally start with the foreign currency exchange rates. So right here in the financial news. Your foreign currency exchange rates first, and as they stand right now, it is the Indian rupee that is at 82.88. It has declined by 4 paise to settle against the U.S. currency today on firm crude oil prices. Gains in domestic stock markets and foreign fund inflows cap the rupee's losses. Pakistani rupee at 279.48. The Bangladeshi taka at 109.73, Sri Lankan rupee 304.64, Nepalese rupee 132.68, the British pound at 0.79, the euro at 0.92, and the Canadian dollar 1.35, Australian dollar 1.52, Mexican peso 16.74, the Chinese yuan at 7.20, Japanese yen 149.18, the Russian ruble at 91.48, Thai baht 35.98, and the Turkish lira at 32.31. World shares firm this morning as Chinese data beat expectations, while investors look to navigate a minefield of central bank meetings this week that could see the end of free money in Japan and a slower glide path for U.S. rate cuts. European stocks have ticked up 0.1% at the open this morning, rising in parallel with MSCI's broadest index of stocks, which was up 0.2%. And U.S. stock futures rose ahead of a key Federal Reserve rate decision as investors set aside worries about stalled interest rates to focus on hopes around AI development. Futures on the benchmark S&P 500 added roughly 0.6%, while those on the tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 led the way higher with an almost 1% gain. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures hovered just above the flat line, signaling a potential comeback from Friday's loss. And markets are on the edge this week as Federal Reserve officials prepare to signal whether they still believe 3 interest rate cuts are likely this year. The major U.S. stock indexes have backed off record highs ahead of the Federal Reserve's all-important March meeting on Wednesday. The tension will finally resolve. Nasdaq said a technology glitch that disrupted pre-market trading for almost 3 hours this morning is now resolved. Bitcoin crawls back after a weekend sell-off, and other cryptocurrencies crawled higher today after a sell-off rocked digital assets over the weekend, and the bull case still holds for cryptos amid a wave of investor interest in new funds and a looming cut to Bitcoin issuance. The largest digital asset fell below 65,000 at points over the weekend after a sell-off that began in earnest last Friday, only days after Bitcoin notched a record high near 74,000. To say that NVIDIA is on a hot streak is an understatement. Shares of the AI darling are up a staggering 232% over the past 12 months and 84% year-to-date. And Mike Lynch, the founder of software company Autonomy, is headed to court today in what U.S. prosecutors have called the largest fraud in the history of Silicon Valley. In 2011, Hewlett-Packard, seeking to expand its profile in software, purchased UK-based Autonomy, which provides data insights to companies, for $11 billion. Less than a year later, HP reduced its value by $8.8 billion, accusing Autonomy of falsifying revenue and accounting figures for the 2 years before the deal. Lynch accused HP of mismanaging the company post-sale, including by firing half its staff. And in 2019, a U.S. judge sentenced Autonomy's former CFO to 5 years in prison on charges of wire and securities fraud. And today, it is Mike Lynch who faces 16 similar counts. President Biden's campaign effort brought in $53 million last month, a sign of accelerating donor interest over a month that saw the election rematch crystallize between Biden and former President Trump. The figure, which includes funds from his campaign, the Democratic National Committee, and related joint fundraising committees, contributed to the $155 million Biden's effort had in the bank at the end of February. American workers are becoming more productive. Recent analysis from the Bank of America showed the average revenue per worker for companies in the S&P 500 hit an all-time high last month after 15 years of no gains. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, auto insurance has risen over 20% from a year ago, and this is the largest jump since 1985. This week, the National Association of Realtors announced it has entered into a settlement, one that could make it less expensive for people to buy homes in the U.S. They have worked hard for years to resolve this litigation in a manner that benefits the members and the American consumer. Agreement effectively will destroy the current home buying and selling business model in which sellers pay both their broker and a buyer's broker, which critics say have driven housing prices artificially higher. The 6% commission, in a sweeping move expected to dramatically reduce the cost of buying and selling a home, the National Association of Realtors announced its settlement with groups of home sellers, agreeing to end the landmark antitrust lawsuits by paying $418 million in damages and eliminating rules on commissions. Efforts to ban library books in the U.S. continued last year. According to the American Library Association, the number of titles targeted for censorship shot up 65%. And Best Buy has announced the recall of more than 250,000 Insignia air fryers sold in the U.S. and Canada over fire, burn, and laceration hazards. This is a recall issued by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, handling on air fryers that can overheat, melt, or break, resulting in fire and burn risks to consumers who are using them. And the recall shared that more than 187,000 units have been sold at the Best Buy in the U.S. and almost 100,000 in Canada. Johnsville Brats is recalling approximately 35,430 pounds of Johnsville turkey sausage that may be contaminated with pieces of rubber. This problem was discovered after the firm started receiving complaints from consumers reporting they found pieces of rubber in the ready-to-eat turkey kielbasa, and there have been no confirmed reports of adverse reactions or injury due to this consumption. But anyone concerned about an injury should contact a healthcare provider and, of course, throw away those sausages. And in its latest effort to crack down on non-members accessing the warehouse retailer's members-only services, Costco is limiting access to its food courts to store members only. And Target announced last week its plan to crack down on bigger purchases at its store's self-checkout lines, putting in a 10-item or less limit for customers. The U.S. ambassador to China said that Beijing's position on a potential TikTok ban in the U.S. was supremely ironic, given the ruling Communist Party's censorship of online platforms within its borders. The U.S. House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved a bill last week that would force the wildly popular short video app to break with its Chinese parent company or face a nationwide ban. U.S. Ambassador Nicholas Burns offered a rebuke, saying Beijing's stance was unjustified, giving it blocks many Western web platforms from operating in the country. Apple has agreed to pay $490 million to settle a class action lawsuit that alleged Chief Executive Tim Cook defrauded shareholders by concealing the falling demand for iPhones in China. A preliminary settlement was filed on Friday with the U.S. District Court in Oakland, California, stemming from Apple's unexpected announcement that the iPhone maker would slash its quarterly revenue forecast by up to $9 billion, blaming U.S.-China trade tensions. And we do have Volkswagen had decided to relaunch the Scout SUV brand. It took a very unusual step, created a new subsidiary company to design, build, and sell vehicles targeted almost entirely at a single market, the United States. And its status as a subsidiary of Volkswagen Group, similar to Audi and Porsche, gives some indication of just how important this project is to Volkswagen. The revived and revamped Scout Motors will introduce its new brand of all-electric, off-road capable SUVs, kind of like Rivian. Employees at a U.S. electric car manufacturer Tesla's factory outside of Berlin today began electing a works council for the second time as Germany's largest union demands better working conditions. Chinese military and state-run media accuse the U.S. of threatening global security days after Reuters report, which found Elon Musk's SpaceX was building hundreds of spy satellites for a U.S. intelligence agency. SpaceX's Starshield unit is developing the satellite network under a classified $1.8 billion contract with the National Reconnaissance Office. And it is Goldman Sachs Group that now expects the Bank of Japan will raise interest rates for the first time since 2007 at tomorrow's meeting, after stronger wage outcomes and a number of news articles over recent days suggested a move is afoot. Bharati-backed Eutelsat OneWeb is positioning itself to lead the race in providing satellite broadband services in India, surpassing competitors like Elon Musk's Starlink and Mukesh Ambani's Reliance Jio. And this will make it the first global satellite biggie offering broadband from space services in India. The company has secured demo satellite spectrum in the Ka and Ku bands for a 90-day period through the administrative route, distinguishing its approach from that of Starlink, which targets retail users. Fly 91 kicked off its commercial operations with its first flight departing from Bengaluru from Goa. The flight took off from the Manohar International Airport in Goa and heading to Bengaluru. And Indigo announced a direct flight this morning between Bengaluru and Agatti, starting from the 31st of this month, enhancing air connectivity to Lakshadweep. Agatti will be the 88th domestic and 121st overall destination in the Indigo network. General Insurance Company, India's leading non-life insurance company, asserts its commitment to build an inclusive India with the launch of Love All initiative. The company has been working towards crafting a workplace that works for all, channeling the inherent recognition that as a country, everybody is organically diverse in ethnicity, language, food habits, abilities, and more. The Love All campaign. Share of 197 Communications, parent company of Paytm, hit upper circuit for second consecutive session this morning. And Gensol Engineering today announced setting up a 160 megawatt solar power project at Bhavnagar in Gujarat at a cost of 128 crore rupees. Indian IT sector employees should brace for flat salary hikes and deferred increments this year. India's information technology sector, valued at $250 billion, is predicted to witness stagnant salaries this year due to the impact of global challenges on company operations. And the water crisis has hit India's Silicon Valley. Employees refuse to come to work. The water crisis in Bengaluru becoming a major concern due to rapid urbanization and population growth. The city, often referred to as the Silicon Valley of India, is facing a severe water shortage, leading to taps running dry in certain areas just weeks before the general elections. Narayana Murthy's big gift for his grandson. Rohan Murthy's son, Ikagra, who is just 4 months old, has been given a gift worth crores by his grandfather. Billionaire Narayana Murthy has gifted his grandson 15 lakh Infosys shares valued at over 240 crore rupees. The 77-year-old Narayana Murthy transferred these 15 lakh shares, equivalent to a 0.04 stake in Infosys, to his grandson in a recent off-market transaction. And as a result of this gift, his own ownership in the IT company decreased to 0.36%. When it comes to a healthy and delicious breakfast recipe, the dosa never fails to impress. Prepared with a batter made of fermented rice and urad dal, dosa, as it is popularly known as in the South Indian cuisine, is prepared on a non-stick pan with minimum oil and ghee. From paper dosa to paneer dosa, with the way people have experimented with this dish, there are more than 100 varieties of this dish that we can see in today's time. Recently, it was given the Guinness World Record in its name, as the 123-foot-long dosa was prepared in Bengaluru by a team of 75 chefs by MTR Foods in partnership with Lorman Kitchen Equipment as part of its centenary year celebrations in a plant in Karnataka. And while the earlier record set on the Guinness World Record was 16.68 meters, this dosa, created recently, had a length of 37.5 meter long dosa. Guyana is the newest kid on the global energy block. The country's growing oil assets, regarded by some as the find of the decade, are increasingly under the spotlight, giving rise to a new tug of war. As is always the case, attempts to grab the assets are on both at the geopolitical and corporate levels. It is Guyana's offshore oil sector that is booming, with over 11 billion barrels of oil equivalent resources discovered so far. Iran sealed contracts worth billions of dollars with domestic companies to boost its oil production in the face of Western sanctions. And as inflation rates in Pakistan reached an alarming rate of 32.89, the Central Bank of Pakistan kept the key interest on hold at 22% for the 6th straight term. Amnesty International calling for the immediate restoration of social media platform X 29 days after the government blocked access to it. And PTI's Rauf Hassan decries the shameful ban on X for a month, calling for immediate restoration. Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb says his singular agenda is to focus on the implementation of much-needed reforms and to negotiate a new larger deal with the International Monetary Fund to pull the economy of Pakistan out of the crisis. The State Bank of Pakistan chose to maintain the status quo by upholding the key policy rate at 22% for the sixth policy meeting in a row. And Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif had to withdraw the notification for the appointment of Zafar Mahmood, the retired BS-22 bureaucrat and pro-Kalabagh Dam expert, as a non-member chairman of the Indus River System Authority, following a strong reaction from Sindh, given its major stakes in water distribution. And Khyber Medical University has imposed a ban on intimate relationship between staff members and students in line with the policy of Higher Education Commission to put brakes on harassment on campuses. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all that I have in the financial news for you, but we do have your final segment for today coming up. Stay with me right here on Community Radio Networks. This is the final segment of our program today, which is Monday, the 18th of March. We're getting this week started for you. Let's get you some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date. It was on the 18th of March in 1852 in New York City that Henry Wells and William Fargo joined with several other investors to launch their namesake business today, one of the world's largest banks. The discovery of gold in California prompted a huge spike in the demand of cross-country shipping. Wells and Fargo decided to take advantage of these great opportunities, and their company shipped its first loads of freight from the East Coast to mining camps scattered around Northern California in 1852. The company contracted with the independent stagecoach companies to provide the fastest possible transportation and delivery of gold dust, important documents, and other valuable freight, and also served as a bank, buying gold dust, selling paper bank drafts, and providing loans to help fuel California's growing economy. Wells Fargo and Company in 1857 formed the Overland Mail Company known as the Butterfield Line, which provided regular mail and passenger service along an ever-growing number of routes. Wells Fargo and Company merged with several other Pony Express and stagecoach lines to become the unrivaled leader in transportation in the West. And when the Transcontinental Railroad was completed 3 years later, the company began using railroad to transport its freight. By the year 1910, its shipping network connected 6,000 locations from the urban centers of the East and the farming towns of the Midwest to the ranching and mining centers of Texas and California and the lumber mills of the Pacific Northwest. And after splitting from the freight business in 1905, the banking branch of the company merged with the Nevada National Bank and established new headquarters in San Francisco. And during World War I, the U.S. government nationalized the company's shipping routes and combined them with the railroads into the American Railway Express, effectively putting an end to Wells Fargo and Company as a transportation and delivery business. And the following April, the banking headquarters was destroyed in a major earthquake, but the vaults remained intact, and the bank's business continued to grow. After two later mergers, the Wells Fargo Bank American Trust Company, shortened to the Wells Fargo Bank in 1962, became and has remained one of the biggest banking institutions in the United States. But it was on today's date in the year 1852 that Wells and Fargo started their shipping and banking company. And on today's date in the year 1911, composer Irving Berlin copyrights Alexander's Ragtime Band. And that, ladies and gentlemen, happened on today's date with a multi-million selling smash hit that had helped turn American popular music into a major international phenomenon, both culturally and economically. And a century ago, even before the phonograph had become a common household item, there was already a burgeoning music industry. And that music industry, that was the Alexander's Ragtime Band out there, that was so popular. Even before the phonograph had become a common household item. But on the sale of sheet music, it was in the medium of printed paper and not the groove lacquer or vinyl discs that songs gained popularity in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. And no song gained greater popularity in that era than Irving Berlin's Alexander's Ragtime Band. On today's date in 1911, this was the song on top. It may seem like a rather grand claim to make about a simple, catchy tune, but then, as now, simple and catchy were great virtues in the realm of pop music, and most people first encountered Alexander's Ragtime Band when it was played on the piano by a friend or family member, and this was the way that song caught on in the era before radio. And part of what helped Alexander catch on was its relative lack of complexity. And though it gained worldwide popularity purely as a piece of printed sheet music, innumerable recorded versions of Alexander's Ragtime Band would soon follow, particularly after lyrics were added to what was originally an instrumental tune. And those lyrics, come on in here, that you're listening to. And what tune are you still familiar a century after they were written? some of Irving Berlin's later contributions to the American popular music canon, songs like White Christmas, God Bless America, and There's No Business Like Show Business, eclipsed even the massive success of Alexander's ragtime band.
Like a chicken, like a chicken, like a chicken, oh, you chicken, and the clarinet.
It's entirely possible, however, that those 20th century classics would never have been written were it not for the commercial success that Irving Berlin achieved with the song he copyrighted on this day in the year 1911.
Better hurry along, come on and hear, come on and hear, Alexander's ragtime band.
And then the worst tornado in U.S. history passes through eastern Missouri, southern Illinois, and southern Indiana, killing 695 people, injuring some 13,000 and causing $17 million in property damage. On today's date in the year 1925, it was known as the Tri-State Tornado. The deadly twister that began its northeast track in Ellington, Missouri, wreaked its worst damage in southern Illinois. More than 500 of the total 695 people who perished were killed there, including 234 in Murfreesboro and 127 in West Frankfurt. This tornado, a dark funnel-shaped cloud containing violently rotating air that develops in climate conditions that in the U.S. are generally unique to the central and southern plains and the Gulf states. And the Tri-State Tornado of 1925 on the 18th of March traveled 219 miles, spent more than 3 hours on the ground, devastated 164 square miles, had a diameter of more than a mile, and traveled at speeds in excess of 70 miles per hour. And on this date in 1933, American automaker Studebaker, then heavily in debt, goes into receivership. The company's president, Albert Erskine, resigned and later that year died by suicide. Studebaker eventually rebounded from his financial troubles only to shut down the assembly line and transition out of the automobile business in 1966. Now, the origins of Studebaker Corporation date back to 1852 when brothers Henry and Clement Studebaker opened a blacksmith shop in Indiana. Studebaker eventually became a leading manufacturer of horse-drawn wagons and supplied wagons to the U.S. Army during the Civil War. Around the turn of the century, the company entered America's burgeoning auto industry, launching an electric car in 1902 and a gas-powered vehicle 2 years later that was marketed under the name Studebaker Garford. After partnering with other automakers, Studebaker began selling gas-powered cars under its own name in 1913 while continuing to make wagons until 1920. And it was all the way until 1966. By the mid-50s, Studebaker, which didn't have the resources of its big three competitors, who were by then pretty famous, had merged with the automaker Packard and was again facing financial troubles. And by the late 50s, the Packard brand was dropped. In 1963, Studebaker shuttered its South Bend plant, ending the production of its cars and trucks in America. And the company's Hamilton, Ontario facilities remained in operation until 1966, when Studebaker shut its doors for the final time after 114 years in business on today's date, the 18th of March in 1966. Nearly 300 students in Texas are killed by an explosion of natural gas at their school. On the 18th of March in 1937, the Consolidated School of New London in Texas sat in the middle of a large oil and natural gas field, and the area was dominated by 10,000 oil derricks, 11 of which stood straight on school grounds. The school was newly built in the 30s for close to $1 million, and from its inception bought natural gas from the Union Gas to supply its energy needs. The school's natural gas bill averaged about $300 a month. Eventually, officials at the school were persuaded to save money by tapping into the wet gas lines operated by Parade Oil Company that ran near the school. Wet gas is a type of waste gas that is less stable and has more impurities than typical natural gas. At the time, it was not completely uncommon for consumers living near oil fields to use this gas. And then, at 3:05 p.m., on today's date, the 18th of March, it was a Thursday afternoon, and 694 students and 40 teachers in attendance at this consolidated school were looking forward to the final bell, which was to ring in 10 minutes. Instead, a huge and powerful explosion, which literally blew the roof off of the building, leveled the school. The blast, which came without warning because natural gas has no smell back then, was felt by people 40 miles away and killed most victims instantly. And that was the natural gas explosion that killed all these school kids. 300 of them died at this Texas school on today's date. And as a result of this incident, wet gas was required to be burned at the site rather than piped away. More importantly, a new state law mandating the usage of malodorants in natural gas for commercial and industrial use was put into place after the incident. This would provide a warning to anyone in the area of a natural gas leak and hopefully prevent large casualties such as this one felt in this explosion. On the 18th of March, the War Relocation Authority is created to take people of Japanese descent into custody, surround them with troops, prevent them from buying land, and return them to their former homes at the close of the war. That was in 1942. Anger towards the fear of Japanese Americans began in Hawaii shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and everyone of Japanese ancestry, old and young, prosperous and poor, was suspected of espionage. And this suspicion quickly broke out on the mainland. In 1942, President Franklin Roosevelt ordered that German, Italian, and Japanese nationals, as well as Japanese American citizens, be barred from certain areas deemed sensitive militarily. That was the War Relocation Authority, marginally better than a prison. Families were sardined into 20 by 20-foot rooms and forced to use communal bathrooms. No razors, scissors, or radios were allowed, and children attended War Relocation Authority schools. The internees transported to one of these 10 relocation centers in California, Utah, Arkansas, Arizona, Idaho, Colorado, and Wyoming. And that was this authority that was established on today's date in 1942. U.S. B-52 bombers were diverted from their targets in South Vietnam to attack suspected communist base camps and supply areas in Cambodia for the first time on today's date, the 18th of March in 1969. While meant to shut down reinforcements for enemy Viet Cong, the bombs terrorized innocent civilians in a country that was still officially neutral in the Vietnam War. President Nixon approved this mission, formally designated Operation Breakfast, at a meeting of the National Security Council. And this mission and subsequent B-52 strikes inside Cambodia became known as the menu bombings. A total of 3,630 flights over Cambodia dropped 110,000 tons of bombs during a 14-month period through April of 1970. This bombing of Cambodia and all follow-up menu operations were kept secret from the American public and the U.S. Congress because Cambodia was ostensibly neutral. To keep the secret, an intricate reporting system was established at the Pentagon to prevent disclosure of this bombing. And although the New York Times broke the story of the secret bombing campaign in May of 1969, 2 months later, there was little adverse public reaction as the U.S. bombed Cambodia for the first time on today's date in 1969. Those were some of the stories that happened from the annals of history on the 18th of March. We are leading into this week with a decent surplus of rain for the year, 2.34 inches above average, and we have a little more rain in the forecast for later Wednesday and Thursday this week. Saturday, of course, was a mess, but yesterday was gorgeous, and today will be equally as nice, but rather cool for this time of the year. The air will continue to dry out, and the clouds will get out of here through the day. Afternoon highs struggling to hit the 60-degree mark, and there is a north wind, 10 to 20 miles per hour. So cover all tender vegetation overnight today because areas of frost will form by daybreak tomorrow morning, especially north and east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There are even freeze warnings across East Texas and the majority of the southeastern states. And the air slowly moderates through the week, and the south wind returns as temperatures will warm to reasonable levels tomorrow through Friday, probably 70s. I would like to thank all the supporters of Community Radio Networks, and a huge thanks going out to Discount Power, to Houston EB5, to the Aluwalia Law Offices, the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, Digital X-Force, Kinsa Law, Mike Kalachi, Shri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, Flash Brush Productions. Huge thanks for your support of community radio networks. You can listen to us live on YouTube every morning, as well as on our website, which is crn.guru. And after the show is completed, which will be in just a few minutes, it is available to be listened to anytime during the day on about 15 different platforms. So wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, also on Spotify, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, or any other app that you listen to your podcast, you will find community radio networks, and the program is called Take on the Day with Shabnam Madgil. There is a holy celebration night, Mavs versus Jazz, happening this week, and that's happening on the 21st at 7:30. The U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce excited to join the hometown team, the Dallas Mavs, for their holy celebration night this Thursday at 7:30. Do arrive early for the pre-game entertainment. And there will be a lot of giveaways. DJ Paris on the plaza, as well as the Bollywood dancers and Dhol Tasha, arranged in collaboration with the Dallas Mavs and the USICOC, DFW, the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce. You can check more details at mavs.com/holy. Lots of holy celebrations, a festival of colors by Mystic Mandala, and that's happening this Saturday. Please do go on to their website, which is Dallas Festival of Colors, to get more information. And the Texas Women's Society is presenting the McKinney Asian Festival. That's also happening this Saturday from 11 to 6. Cultural food, live performances, fun activities, a lantern walk, and plenty more at the Dr. Glenn Mitchell Memorial Park on Louisiana Street in McKinney. And SABA, the South Asian Bar Association of Dallas, and DABA, the Dallas Asian American Bar Association, are together bringing you 2024 Holy Festival celebrations from 2 to 4 this Saturday. And they will be at the Breckenridge Park Gazebo at 5300 Renner Road in Richardson. Please use parking lot B off of Brand Road for convenient parking. And if you did attend last year, you'll recall that this is the same venue as happening this Saturday. Holy Festival of Colors, co-hosted by Saba and Daba, this Saturday from 2 to 4. We also would like for you to know that the Success Door, supporting the Pledge Campaign Foundation, presents Fly, First Love Yourself, and that's Showcase Season 4, happening on the 6th of April at the Dew Event Center from 4 to 8 in Louisville. Tips are having their 5K and 10K run and walk on Sunday, the 7th of April, at the Oak Point Preserve. And this is on Spring Creek Parkway in Plano. Please do register at runsignup.com. Also would like you all to know that beginning this year, TIPS NEC is inaugurating a mentorship program to help students of Indian and South Asian origin. And this is for medical students in the North Texas region and graduates of Indian Medical School who are looking for residency positions, fellowships, clinical and research observerships, and jobs. All you need to do is send an email to mentorship@TIPS NEC, Northeast Chapter, tipsnec.org. Remember that date, the 8th of April, where we are going to be seeing the total solar eclipse. And again, as we get close to it, I'll get you more details about the solar eclipse that is going to be viewed here from the United States also. The technology, the business plan competition, technology competition and the business plan competition happening on the 12th of April, the business plan round by the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce. So please check out more details on their website, usicoc.org. Vibha is having their annual kite flying festival. It's the 18th annual kite flying festival at the Sound at Cypress Waters in Coppell on the 13th of April from 3 to 8. Talent for a reason. Come enjoy fun performances, fashion shows, bounce house, henna, face painting, marketplace. It's free admission and free parking there. And that is Vibha's Brighter Future for Children as they present their 18th Kite Flying Festival on the 13th of April from 3 to 8 at the Sound Amphitheater in Coppell. The Hyderabad Society of North Texas have their Eid picnic happening on the 20th of April from noon to 6 at the Travick Pavilion, and that is in Grapevine. And for more information, you can call Muhammad Hamid at 469-544-4118. Also on the 20th of April, a very important event here in town. It is the annual Gala of Pratham. Changing lives, transforming communities. Special guest is Vidya Vox, the YouTuber and singer, and Krish Dhanam will be the speaker. He is, of course, a speaker and an author. Saturday, the 20th of April at the Omni Frisco Hotel. We are thrilled to invite you to the 2024 Pratham Dallas Fort Worth Gala, an extraordinary evening dedicated to empowering children and young people in India to transform their lives and communities. 20th of April, it's a Saturday at the Omni Frisco Hotel, and this year's gala theme is Changing Lives, Transforming Communities, and will highlight the remarkable impact of Pratham's work in expanding access to quality learning opportunities. So please mark your calendars for the 20th of April and join us for an unforgettable evening of exquisite dining, inspiring company, and a cause that truly matters. 360 shows, Diamond Productions, and 24/7 Entertainment presenting Neetu Chandra as Umrao Jan Ada in this West End musical play in a Broadway style based on the novel written by Mirza Hadi Ruswa. 26th and 27th of April here in Dallas, there will be 3 shows, and tickets are available at Ticketmaster.com. For the first time in American television history, PBS stations across the U.S. will show a new documentary film on Swami Vivekananda called America's First Guru, and that too a first by an Indian origin documentary filmmaker. It'll be happening in May. 360 shows and Diamond Productions are presenting Badshah's The Pagal Tour on the 14th of June at the Curtis Culwell Center. And we do have Shreya Ghoshal coming into Dallas on the 16th of June, also at the Curtis Culwell Center. So a lot happening here in town, and as more information is available, we'll get you more events right here. But as it stands today on this 18th of March, that, ladies and gentlemen, is your social calendar and also my show for today. For those of you who'd like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675-1754. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning.